I hope you're enjoying our journey through unstoppable truth in the book of Revelation. I am Camille Farrow, and I invite you to come and study with me as we are looking at scriptures in the book of Revelation. We have studied the 5 mysteries, which are themes in the book of Revelation. Now we have studied, and we're up to about chapter 8 right now. We're going to begin to look at the trumpets. This is one of the most exciting things that I get to share with you now. It's really going to be a wild journey from this point on. And I am going to share with you some really, really intense things. We are going to look at some pictures that I have of things that are going to be coming that I believe are part of these trumpets. And as we look at these pictures together, I hope that you'll be encouraged and begin to understand a little bit more about what we are going to be have gone through and are going to go through. Now, we saw last week that there are 7 seals, but once John saw the 7th seal open, he saw 7 trumpets. So the 7th seal is the 7 trumpets. You have to get to the end of all 7 trumpets before you get to the end of the seal, the 7th seal. We are going to do a little bit of history review, and you have to keep Israel in context. Remember, they are the ones, our gears over here, they are the ones keeping Moses' law and the gears of Moses' law going. And everything, they themselves going back to the land of Israel as Jewish people back onto the land. It's the only miracle that's ever taken place like that. It's called a national miracle, where they were a people group on a land, been scattered and conquered for 2,000 years, coming back together as that people group on the land of Israel. And they are the actual prophetic time clock ticker. They're the fig tree that has come into blossoming and into fruition. So when we are interpreting the book of Revelation and looking at some things, we're going to look at some things outside of what the scriptures actually say. But we are looking at it in context of Israel and the mystery of Israel. And it took World War I and World War II to produce the nation of Israel. We talked about that in those earlier classes. World War I, the Caliphate had Israel for 1,200 years. And they sided with Germany in World War I. When they lost the war, the Arab people had to move out of Israel. And they had to leave the land, and it became a British-mandated state in 1917. The Jewish people were able to buy back the land that year. It was actually a year of Jubilee that they were able to buy back the land. And they began to come back into the land. Now, the Second World War took place, and as a result of the Holocaust, it put a lot of pressure on the nations of the world to come up with a solution for the Jewish people. And because of the Holocaust, it put a lot of pressure on them to birth this nation of Israel. And it birthed in one day, fulfilling Isaiah 66, verse 8. Now, during that time, the World War II came to an end by President Harry Truman. Harry Truman brought World War II to an end by dropping 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. These 2 atomic bombs ended the war abruptly. It was really interesting and curious because after the war was over and after Israel became a nation, the only way that they could become a nation is if they were recognized by another major power nation. That's how they could be birthed as a nation. They had to have another nation come in and declare that they were actually a nation and would observe them as a nation. Now, President Harry Truman was really at odds with George C. Marshall, his Secretary of State. And they didn't, George C. Marshall said, if you go and you support Israel, I'm out of here and I will fight you till my dying day. And he also had a best friend that was a Zionist Jewish man and begging President Truman for the nation of Israel. The day that Israel became a nation, just minutes after they were formed, Harry Truman stepped up to the plate and it recognized them as a nation, and they were able to birth and come into nationhood and become the state of Israel. What's so interesting about that is nobody in the world after World War II would mess with Harry Truman. He was crazy man. He dropped 2 atomic bombs. He had atomic bombs in his hip pocket. He didn't have he would drop an atomic bomb if he wanted to. So all of the people in the Middle East, all the people in Europe, Russia, Stalin and Russia, everybody backed off from Harry Truman when he stepped up to the plate, but he was the only person on planet Earth that would have been able to back up the state of Israel the day that they were born. He was an intense guy. Now, let's look at the first trumpet. The seventh angel who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. Now, this is the first one. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there was a storm of hail and fire mingled with blood cast upon the earth. And a third part of the earth was burned up, and a third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. So in this trumpet, you have this hail, fire, and blood, and a third of everything burning up and dying. During World War I, they practiced something called the scorched earth policy, and they would absolutely burn everything in its path. It would scorch the land. The people retreating would burn the earth, and the people advancing would burn the earth. Now, during this scorched earth policy, it was practiced all the way up until Vietnam. They would burn all the green grasses, all the trees, all the bushes, all the shrubs in the scorched earth policy. What they are describing, what John is describing in the book of Revelation, in this picture that you see here, is they are describing scorched earth policy warfare. It's a form of military warfare. The second trumpet that blew, his trumpet, was resembling a great mountain of fire, blazing fire. I want you to see this picture of this mountain of fire in Revelation chapter 8, verse 8 and 9. There's only 2 verses talking about this mountain of fire. And what's interesting about it is that it says a third of the living creatures died and a third of the ships sank. I believe the first trumpet was World War I with scorched earth policy. I believe the second trumpet was World War II. My husband had just been to a military museum, and they had a big billboard that said 1/3 of the ships sank. There were 105,127 ships in World War II. And a third of them sank. 36,000 of them sank. That is extremely perfectly close to what Revelation is saying here. Now remember, both World War I and World War II produced the nation of Israel. I think they are very, very significant events. I don't think we're stretching too much here to say that these are not happening. So let's look at the picture of the mountain of fire on the sea. What does that mean? Think about what the atomic bomb might have looked like. It was on islands in the middle of the ocean in Japan. These huge balls of fire were created, mountains of fire, and there is a reflection of that image on the sea. And you can see in that black and white picture that mushroom cloud going up, but it's actually being reflected in the water. That is how World War II ended. I believe that World War II is the second trumpet. Now we have the birthing of the nation of Israel as a result of these first 2 trumpets. Now the next trumpet, the third trumpet, is a trumpet that I have had written in my Bible for 35 years. I want to tell you a little bit about my Bible and how I have worked on it since I was a teenager in high school. I would take my notes in the margins of my Bible. If I heard something really good in a sermon, I would write it down, or if I was reading a book, I would write my notes in the margins of my Bible. And after 7 or 8 years, my Bible would begin to fall apart. By the way, Bibles that are falling apart usually belong to people who aren't. I like to say that. And I would have to go buy a new Bible. And when I get my new Bible, I would go over every single page in my Bible and all the notes that were written on it. And I would go back over it, I would review it, and I would think, is it worthy to go into my new Bible? Is it something that I want to carry with me? And I would transfer everything into my Bible. Now listen to this. This is a wild story. I have never lost my Bible for 35 years. But about 6 months ago, my best friend wanted every note that was written in my Bible. She took my Bible for a month and a half and then transferred everything out of my Bible into her Bible, even my own personal notes when we got saved and baptized and things like that. But she was just motivated to write it all down. Well, I went to Israel on a trip, and guess what? I lost my Bible in Israel. I guess that's a good place to lose your Bible if you're going to lose one. But I didn't get mad or upset. Want to know why? God, Kinko's copied. He copied my Bible into her Bible. When I got back from my trip, I called her and I said, guess what? I lost my Bible. And she goes, I can't believe it. I'll get it in the mail to you immediately. And I've been able to go back through it again and transfer all my notes back in there. Now, I'm telling you this awesome testimony of how God saved the notes in my Bible because as a teenage girl, I wrote this note in my Bible on trumpet number 3. It's been sitting there, Bible after Bible after Bible, for 35 years. Let's read what the third trumpet says. The third trumpet blew his trumpet, and a huge star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it dropped on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the water. And the name of the star was Wormwood, and a third part of the waters was changed into wormwood, and many of the people died using the water because it had become bitter. Now, my neighbor who lived across the street from me used to live in the Czech Republic, and used to live back when it was even under communist rule. And she remembers as a girl this event that took place right in her backyard. It's called Chernobyl. The Chernobyl disaster, literally in the Ukrainian language, means wormwood. If you're reading a Ukrainian Bible, they will not use the word Chernobyl, they will use the word wormwood. It means bitter, bitter to the taste. And this Chernobyl being released, they decided to run some tests. And on these tests, if you don't mind showing that slide of the picture of Chernobyl, that would be great. When they were running these tests, they put down all of their safety measures to see if it would pass the tests. And lo and behold, something happened, and within 30 seconds, it blew off a 2-million-pound concrete lid that was on this reactor. And it shot cesium-137, which is a radioactive nuclear material, a mile high into the atmosphere. It was a nuclear fire that went a mile up into the atmosphere, releasing cesium-137. This absolutely got into the water systems of the rivers and the land. There are actually brownouts over Europe and Russia where you can't grow anything there because there's too much of this radioactive material, and it will be dead land for 100 years. We won't see the end of the effects of Chernobyl for another 100 years, and even then we still have other radioactive materials to get out of the environment and out of the system from this Chernobyl disaster that took place. Now, the people that are around these rivers and around these waters, my friend was telling me, like thyroid cancer is at like 287% or something. It was just way high up there. And the people, and by the way, thyroid cancer is what cesium-137 does to the body when it's in the body. But it was a massive catastrophe, and it was a massive event. And it was after World War II, too. It happened in 1968. Now, the fourth trumpet is a really peculiar trumpet. It says, The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was smitten, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that the light of the third of them was darkened, and a third of the daylight was withdrawn, and likewise a third of the night was kept from shining. Remember, we studied in Matthew where Jesus said, if the days were not cut short, there would be no flesh that would remain alive. Einstein was onto something with his theory of relativity. That's E equals mc squared. And I can't explain it to you because I'm not a physicist, but what I do understand is that time and space and distance and all of those things move within each other. They change. If one of them changes, then the others have to change as well. Think about a toilet paper roll when you put a new one onto the toilet paper roll and you pull it, and it only goes around 4 or 5 times before you have enough to use. When you get to the end of your toilet paper roll and you've got just a little bitty bit left and you pull it, it spins real fast. It goes like 15 times and you're like, oops, we're out. But it spins really fast as you're pulling it out. That is what the theory of relativity is talking about. We are at time, and time is now coming to an end. It's coming to a close, and time is speeding up. It's going faster and faster and faster as you're getting to the end of the roll of time. What is this verse saying? It's saying a third of the moon, sun, and stars are not giving its light. A third of the day is not shining. A third of the night is shining. So what is a 1/3 of a 24-hour day? It's 16 hours. And we are literally operating on a 16-hour day versus a 24-hour day that our parents, when they were being raised as children, it just took forever to get from the sunrise to sunset. And even in your lifetime, it probably takes you felt like, wow, time really went by slow then. I remember asking some elderly people at a nursing home that were Christians, and I said, you know, if anybody's time is going slow like a tortoise, it would be an elderly person at a nursing home. There's not much to do. And I asked them, I said, do you think time is going by faster now or when you were a kid? And the whole table shouted, now. They all felt it. Even though they're not living a fast-paced life, living a very active life like some of us busy moms can do, they still feel that the time is going by much faster than it did before. My son came home in the 7th grade, threw down his backpack on the first day of school and said, wow, the day just flew by. He said it 3 days in a row, his first days at school. What 7th grade boy comes home from school and says time flies by? He's feeling the speed of time going faster. I believe that this trumpet has already been blown. Now, the next 3 trumpets are called 3 woes. I looked and I saw a solitary eagle flying in the mid-heaven, and it flew, and I heard a crying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth because of the rest of the trumpet blast of the 3 angels that are about to sound. Now, there's 3 trumpet blasts left. You have number 5, 6, and 7. So now we're beginning number 5, and it's the first woe as well. The 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven, from the sky and the earth. And the angel was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. And he opened the long shaft of the abyss, and smoke, like smoke of a huge furnace, puffed out of the long shaft, so that the sun and the atmosphere were darkened by the smoke of the long shaft. Let's keep reading. Oh, well, let's look here. Do you remember, now this would be after Chernobyl, do you remember when Saddam Hussein went down to Kuwait and tried to get Kuwait so that he could have ports to get his oil out? And he took over Kuwait and he put 700 oil wells on fire. The smoke filled the air. Now, what is an oil well? It's a shaft down into the abyss of the earth. He filled the sky with smoke where the sun was blotted out for 3 months. In fact, I found an interesting comment in the National Geographic, and it said the roosters didn't crow for months because they never could see the sun. I believe that that is the fulfillment. I believe that Saddam Hussein's first Gulf War, when he went to go after Kuwait, is the 5th trumpet. We're going to see some more details about this trumpet, about it being a short trumpet, a short period of time, just a few months long war, and we're going to see some other details that I think you'll find interesting. So out of the smoke were locusts that came forth onto the earth with such power that was granted them in their tails like scorpions. They were told to not harm the herbage of the earth, nor were they to harm any tree, but only such human beings as do not have the seal or the mark of God on their foreheads. So these locusts were only able to take out the bad guys and not take out the herbage of the earth. No scorched earth policy here. Do you know that in the Gulf War was the very beginning, and it was the first time that laser-guided missiles were used, and they only harmed the building that they were going after and not the things that were surrounding it, not the trees, not the shrubs, not anything else around it. These laser-guided bombs began during the Saddam Hussein War, the first Gulf War. They were not permitted to kill or torment the people that were marked by the sun, by the marked on their forehead. And these people suffered pains. They were tortured, like from the sting of a scorpion, like the sting of a scorpion would be on a person. And in those days, the people will seek death and will not find it, and they will yearn to die, but death flees away from them. With all of this oil burning in the atmosphere, blotting out the sun for 3 months, people had sores in their mouths and in their throats for swallowing. It was a very, very painful time in the Middle East during this war and all the oil that had been released into the atmosphere and petroleum. Now, I want you to see this picture. My son's 9-year-old friend came down the street, was so proud of making this Lego helicopter for me, and he showed up at my door and he says, "Hi, how do you like my locust?" And I was working on this class and I almost fell over. And I said, "Why did you call it a locust?" He said, "Look at it. It looks like a locust. It has a body, it has long legs." And I thought that was such a curious thing that happened with this 9-year-old little boy just calling a helicopter a locust. So let's look at the rest of this locust description and see if it has anything that looks like maybe that could look like. They resembled horses, and they were equipped for battle. On their heads was something like a golden crown, something that whirled, like a helicopter has wings or a crown on top of its head. Had the faces of men or the faces of people. Helicopter has faces of people sitting in the windows of the front of it. Had the hair of a woman, teeth like a lion, breastplates made of iron, whirring noise made by the wings were like chariots going at full speed. Now, if you're John on the island of Patmos 2,000 years ago and you've never seen a chariot or a helicopter, chariots running at full speed would be a good way to describe the sound of the whirring of the blades of a helicopter. It has the tails to sing, it has the tails like scorpions, and it has the ability to hurt men, and it gets very specific there in verse 10, 9 verse 10, and it says for 5 months. The Gulf War, the first Gulf War, was a very short war. And it says, over them was a king of this abyss, and his name in Hebrew was Abaddon, or destruction, and in Greek was Apollyon, or destroyer. Then it says, the first woe has passed. So now the first woe has ended. We know how long the fifth trumpet is because now it says the first woe's ended. Did you know that Saddam Hussein's name literally means destruction and destroyer? The reason why he was named that is because his mother was in so much pain during childbirth it almost destroyed her. And she named him Saddam, the name of destruction. I believe that Saddam Hussein and the first Gulf War is the fulfillment of the fifth trumpet. Thank you for being with us. God bless you. We will hope to see you next week with Unstoppable Truth.